Well, welcome to Thursday, I guess session number two for those in Thursday. Hopefully you are able to sleep in and didn't have the first one. And I'm sure for some of you, I'm the beginning of your week and hopefully the end of your week. And hopefully for those, it was a good week and hopefully a good week one across the board. My name is Mitch Cochran. For those, I believe most of you had me for the first, so a lot of tonight will be similar to week one, a little bit different, and we'll be branching out very quickly. And where this class focuses on data mining specifically, and lots of exercises, lots of techniques, and things that we're going to be working on. It'll be different. A couple things, kind of as an overview. Occasionally, my camera will lose focus due to light. I've got a large screen in front of me, and by daylight and the backlight and whatnot, sometimes the autofocus loses me. And if so, then no, it's not something that you've been drinking or the coffee or tea all of a sudden make it funny and I'm fuzzy. No, okay, it's actually the camera. So yeah, so I try and pay attention to that. So occasionally I have to do some calisthenics to, figure out how to get the camera to work and change some of the lighting or whatnot. And it's just because I have a huge screen sitting in front of me, which adds to the light, so to speak. So yeah, go to the light. All right, so I'm the crazy American. I'm very serious about all of this, but let's have fun with it. The more you enjoy, the more you learn. Focus on it. I was a terrible student in college and whatnot. But when I focus on stuff, I only want to focus on once. I don't want to have to study and study and study and study. I want to learn it and then kind of move on, type of thing. So the key thing for me is when you look at something, really focus and really don't look at something half-hearted. You really need to put the energy in when you're looking at, because then you'll have time to do everything else. Because at your life at this point, one of your biggest issues is time management between my classes and all the other ones and family and or work and or all those things. Time management is critical. So the best you can do, in the shortest amount of time, type of thing. So, all right. So let's kind of go forward. You'll also notice that the screen is a little bit different. I just wanted to handle that now. In PowerPoint, there are two different ways for those if you are using PowerPoint to share presentations. And this will be the case when you guys do yours at the end of the semester. Here, I actually share the window, and the window's in Edit. And the one advantage here is on the left, I'm able to see all the way down. I don't show you the notes pad, e-page, even though I don't use them. There's no reason to have that. And so you kind of get an idea of how many more slides are out there. The downside is PowerPoint, if you put it in full show mode with multiple screens, it takes over the full screen and then puts a preview of the next. So if you're in a conference room, you own the room. You give presentations. We want you to be able to change the lights and whatnot. You want your presentation to be the most effective thing that you can do. Great. Okay, so with PowerPoint, it does that as a tool with two screens because it'll put one screen up on the wall, the other will show you the next slide. So you can talk transitions. You can have an incredible presentation because you can always segue and move to the next slide when it's appropriate or have extra questions answered, whatnot. In the edit mode, you really don't get that, but you have to be in the edit mode when you're doing the Zoom because that way you can see the pictures and the chat and the participants, and there are just too many windows type of thing to do that. So it's a little bit different. So learn your technology and what's best, because some things will be different in remote, some things will be different in live. When you're at work in a live classroom with, heaven forbid, live people, those types of things are a little bit different. And always own the room. Always make it the best for your presentation. Look at your presentations, look at the lights, the background. A lot of times your presentation on the screen will be different than it will be up on the wall because on the wall, the projectors are usually not as bright. If you're TV screens, then you're okay. But the other thing is how many things are on the slide. Because our slides are notes, there are going to be more information than I would normally put. I try and fill the screen, so I'll fill up text and whatnot. But there are going to be some slides that have very small, but that's because they are being used as notes. So when we talk about tests and things like that, they're all coming from the slides. So that is, in effect, the book type of thing. We're going to be having a book. The book is there. I want you to try and order version 3. I haven't seen version 4 is out, but it's a weird subscription. So I haven't done enough research on it to see the difference to the new version 4. So if you can pick up 3, preferably from somebody that's had the class before, I put a PDF of version 2. Version 2 and 3 are very similar. And I highlight as we get along into some of the exercises, I highlight the differences to make sure that you're covered because I want you guys to be successful. This class is going to be very, very intensive on the number of things that you have to do. I'm very big on the number of things that you get to turn in. Okay. So do not get behind. Well, try not to get behind. Do not get behind is a silly thing because everybody gets behind every now and then, but please catch up. Everything is due. Absolutely, yes. We have things and there's a grace period and we'll talk about that. But really, the last Friday of week 15, everything is due, period. Because after that, I still have to grade and turn in grades. Heaven forbid. So generally notes would be available on the week prior to class. I already have the notes ready for the next one. Right now, everything has been shared up on the OneDrive. If you haven't gotten that, please send me an email, and the email is mcochran.it@gmail, and it'll be in the next section, so that I can add you to that. My understanding is the learning management system, which is built on an open source product called Moodle. And the university is fine-tuning that, and I believe they're updating. So I don't know if that has come back online. When that is there, then you will be doing all of your submissions into Moodle. You'll be doing the discussion questions and all of those types of things there in Moodle. But right now, I want to make sure the material is available for you, so that's up on the shared drive. Okay. I'm also a fan of TED Talks, so there will be some TED Talks out there. If you've not seen a TED Talk, it's technology, entertainment, and I always forget the D because it's not diversion or something, not diversity or something. But anyway, it started 10, 15 years ago. And they have conferences. Well, they'll have 15 or 30-minute speeches on topics from people that are expert in those fields. So they are incredibly interesting on what they are, and they will focus very thin. We will not be testing on those, but I want you to listen to them while you're eating or doing something, so you don't really have to take notes or pay attention. If I am going to test on one, you will get fair warning that something will be included in midterm final or whatever the exercises are. But they give you a lot of outside exercises. And one of the interesting things is a lot of them are fairly old, and in some cases up to 10 years old. They still have a lot of relevance. And that's a really interesting thing. That for me, a lot of the things in this field, somebody comes up with a great idea. In academics, people will come up, well, hey, this idea for frameworks and how things should relate and whatnot. And then it's a thing of over time. What works? What does the marketplace of either marketplace of ideas or marketplace of economics, gets accepted into that? When we talk about time, we talk about that. I worked for IBM, and the biggest thing IBM had some incredible technologies, but IBM as a company made some major marketing decisions that were really poor. They said they wanted to make too much money. The money that they wanted to make, so they charged too much, and they thought the value was there and they would get it because IBM was pretty arrogant at that time. Because, hey, we're IBM and nobody can compete with us. And I was an IBMer, and yes, but we gave, and that's one thing I did learn is you do never nickel and dime people. Nickel and dime means don't charge them for every little thing. Make sure that they're happy, whatnot. Yes, you may have to charge more overall, but be careful, type of thing. So with that, so I went a little bit sideways and now I've lost my train of thought. Okay, so we're going to go forward. All right. Who am I? I'm the crazy guy. One of the classes told me that the English professor there said that I did not speak proper English, and the answer is yes. I do a lot of slang. I use the word super as a adjective to basically say you're doing great and appreciate it, and it's better than excellent, super type of thing. So there's a lot of things there. So yes, business. In the U.S., there are a lot of different dialects, so to speak, and really it's more slang. The Deep South, the Northeast in Maine, the Midwest, they all have different. And what's interesting is California has one of the lightest accents. They've said that if you do radio stations throughout the U.S., you typically pick people from California because they can actually understand. And I'm very in awe of you guys to learn a difficult topic and you're learning it in a different language. And so that's incredible to be able to do that. There's a lot of vocabulary that you have to learn for English, and then there's a lot of vocabulary you have to learn for your marketing and your finance and for your IT and data mining and all these things and trying to put them all together. And you actually have an advantage. Most Americans, with the exception of the West, where we focus a lot on Spanish, you're at an advantage to learn multiple languages because they're concepts that are spoken differently and brought together differently when you read them in their native tongue, so to speak. If you read a novel that's French in French, it has a different impact because somebody doesn't really translate the words completely right for an or. There are some words, there are some translations that just don't quite make it correctly, and so you give kind of the wrong part. And so one of those is actually in here. As I say that, that's one thing I want to make sure to add is where is it in here? I don't see. Where is it? More. There you go. Because what I'm looking for is I'd floating. Oh, I'll have to look at it, but it's the text. And it's not showing in my version of Zoom for some reason. Annotate remote show meeting. All right, I will have to find that. Anyway, and the text. So things don't really cross over as well sometimes when you leave that. So I'm in awe in that the different parts that you leave. Also, when we talk about languages, French, German, Italian and Spanish are very similar. There are a lot of words when we talk about Spanish. And Spanish is hard because Spanish actually has about 6 different versions because you have California Spanish, you have Puerto Rico, the small island Caribbean below New York. That's a whole different Spanish. Mexico has one Spanish. South America has another Spanish. Spain, where Spanish started, has a whole different Spanish. So when we were working for cities, we would have translations. The question would be translate into which version. And so you've got a whole different alphabet. You've got a whole different tongue inflection and whatnot. So everything that's Latin based, the Italian, French, Spanish, whatnot, those all have very similar things. So it's a little bit easier than to try and go from one of the Asian based languages. I'm not sure what the appropriate term is, but one of the languages from Asia. Very, very different. They also say that for Scandinavian Nordic. Anyway, so I've been a instructor for Cal State San Bernardino cybersecurity. I have 4 classes there. For policy and advanced cybersecurity and everything else. Who else am I doing? Systems analysis and then also analytics. So we're working there. I've been an IT director for a city, which means I'm right next to the city manager running the city. I was running the city of Monrovia for 20 years as running all the IT. I did the courts. I did private industry, corporate product manager, which basically we do support and manage all the inventory for the Western U.S. For a company, and some statistics and homeland security and admin. So yeah, 3 different masters. So a whole bunch of little odds and ends. But that key line at the bottom, please use the mcochran.it@gmail. Some people try and use the email inside the learning management systems. I don't check that one as often. Everything I try and funnel through mcochran.it@gmail. So that way I can see it. It comes up on my phone where I have 6 or 7 different email addresses. And so I can't check them all the time type of thing. So please, if you have questions, I am very available. Typically, I'm going to be available, try and turn on the session 10, 15 minutes before, and we'll have 10 or 15 minutes after class so that you can ask questions then. We'll turn off the recording at the end of class so that when you ask questions, you can do that privately so that they don't get broadcast if you feel, uncomfortable about some of the questions. My job is to support you as much as we can. So what are our goals for this class? Business analytics, formulate, solve problems, managerial decision making. So you're going to be taking a lot of these. You're going to be writing memos basically as if you're in business. And we're going to talk about the bluff. And for those that have had the other class, same type of thing. You're going to find my classes very similar. in the things that we're going to be doing in the structure, both the setup and some of the concepts and how we address them. I really want to make you very prepared for business type of thing. So descriptive statistics, data visualization, not as big as the data analytics class, and standard quantitative statistical techniques, analytic software. So we're going to be using R and Python and some of these tools that are incredible because they are freebies. Okay, they're open source. The open source means that, for those that aren't familiar with that term, that means that they're basically somebody developed this as a passion or made that available so that anybody can use that without a copyright. Matter of fact, with open source and some open source licenses, you can even take that product and build your own products on top of that. Preferably, there are some group public licenses saying that you're supposed to put those back and add back to the community, but that open source is available. So the neat part to build on that is the R, the Python, some of those you can take to wherever the companies you go to. You're going to be going to some small companies. In the US, 90%, 95% are small businesses, defined as the 25 or less. So you're going to probably work for those if you don't already. And so they have no resources. Your people are some of your biggest costs. And how do you build that? And somebody says, hey, I want to do some analysis. And you kind of go, well, with what tools? And they can't afford tools. Well, R and Python and some of those you can run on your PC. So that allows you to be able to do things. And over time, more tools will be available in the cloud. So we're going to be doing that business analysis. The focus that we're going to be doing is business analysis. So when you do the 11 exercises that you're going to do, they're all going to be answered by business memos. And I want you to analyze what the results are. So you're going to be given a cookbook that's going to go through and give you a whole bunch of things that you can do. You're going to be doing them. And then as part of that memo at the end, you're going to write up, well, why do you care? Okay, that is going to be the business analysis part. And as long as you support it, I may make some comments and whatnot, but you get full credit if you could fully support what you're going and doing, unless you're way off base. Okay, but no, I'm very much about, I want to develop your thinking model. Okay, these tools, you part of the goal is to understand the foundation of how the tools work, what the tools can do, what they can't do, so that as you go forward and over time in your careers, AI and things are going to change greatly. And we're going to be doing some AI things as well to show that AI is wrong in some cases. So how do we build some of that? I want you to have that common sense to be able to understand when things kind of look right or wrong, or those things that in the movies and whatnot, where they kind of, you hear something and you kind of lift an eyebrow, kind of like the picture of a dog that hears something and says, what? I want you to have that common sense to be able to see when somebody says, or especially AI, because we don't want to trust AI. AI has delusions. AI will come out and literally create false facts. Types of things. So we'll talk about those. Explain the general theoretical practical aspects. You're going to be doing 11 exercises in data analytics. Okay, 11 different techniques that we're going to do for people in the earlier class when we did the statistics and whatnot, a whole bunch of those tools. And you're going to see a whole bunch of tools in here, whether it's classification, regression, logistic regression, all these various things that are going to be out there. Classification, correlation, the matrices, all those different tools we're going to be using because they all give you more information. And our overall goal is you want to be able to explain from a data mining point of view, we're trying to explain why something works, and there's always going to be some error. And so our job is to get the best explanation we can. And how is an explanation better? Well, we get rid of some of the error. If we can get that error smaller. And so what do we do? Well, when you find error, you actually look inside the error. Is there another pattern? Is there something that I can then explain again or explain more? So all these tools look at it. And what's interesting is you could take a business problem and look 2 or 3 different tools, and they will give you different answers. And sometimes an unexpected one will give you better explanations of what's going on. The interesting part about that is to then build the theory of why some of these things happen the way that they happen. because that's the numbers. We're dealing with numbers. Numbers will tell you about a relationship, but they will never tell you why. Okay, it's up to you to use the practical, and whether it's scientific, whether it's a financial formula, whether it's marketing, it's that foundation of knowledge to build on to say, okay, why some of those things are. So the basic components: data analytics, define the roles, pre-processing, analytic techniques, classification, prediction, demonstrate the ability to prepare and analyze the data sets, determine which data analytic techniques are best suited for which problems. Okay, and generally that's one of the questions on the midterm is, okay, given which types of issues, which tools work the best for which types of issues. Okay. So what is expected? This is the scariest slide because this is the one saying, oh my God, this is all the stuff that we have to do. All right, so you are going to have Blackboard discussion questions. So each week you get 2 or 3 or 4 discussion questions, and I'm just expecting, the paragraph type of answer on that. Now, with that, okay, I do discussion questions a little bit differently. Okay, but let me, I guess, preface that all the discussion questions in total are worth 10 points. So if we give you 25 discussion questions or 30 discussion questions, okay, if you answer all 30, you get 10 points. If you answer half of the 30, you get 5 points. Okay, and I look through every discussion question, and as long as you have a reasonable discussion, you don't say I agree. Okay, that doesn't count anymore. Then you're fine. Now, on discussion questions, what I am looking for is, so if we have 2 questions, we've got a class of 50-ish, okay? When you have discussion questions, there aren't 50 answers to these discussion questions. What is the purpose of a discussion question? I want you to think about something. I think about this topic. I want you to do a little bit of research on it and just kind of think about it. So this is not the long, really, dissertation type answers. I want you to be able to look at it and think about that topic in more depth. Great. Okay. But what I want to do, because there are 50 of you, I want to cut that in half. Okay. And so you will have to answer every question, okay, that is posed, because I will look and make sure your name has a response in every question. But one of those you do the full, okay, so if I give you 2 questions, you choose which question you're going to answer the full. You like one question better than the other, great. You do the full answer, the normal 100, 150 words, whatever it is that's appropriate for that question. And then the other question is when you do the response. In a traditional class, you're going to be doing a post and a response within each question. No, because that's too much writing, I don't want you to do that. I want you to post in one and respond in the other. So you only have to do 1 entry in each question. Now, if you have 3 questions, 1 post and 2 responses. If there are 4, 2 posts, 2 responses. Okay. That is the same, and so it is the same for both classes. Same pattern. I will follow the same pattern in both classes. So if you have that, you get used to it. Great, then we're good. You're going to be doing 2 presentations. Okay, the first one is on data mining real-world examples. I want you, between now and the midterm, you're going to be doing a presentation, and it's just a short 2-page, 3-page type of presentations. You're going to find an example of data mining in the real world, and then you're going to basically sum it up, and you're going to do a little bit of research. You'll Google it and find 2 extra answers, because if you just do something as you read an article, you're a parrot. The article might be right, the article might be wrong. Okay, and there are a lot of bad articles out there. I want you to be intelligent, so I want you to Google it, get a little bit more information so you get smart. And then so the first half of your 2-3-page paper is what did the article say? And the second half is, why do you care? Okay, what is it that it's important? What is the highlights of those types of things? Now, when I say page, it is single-spaced. Nothing in the real world is double-spaced, the exception of legal stuff where they do some line numbers and whatnot. So you're going to do it, and then you're going to be presenting that in class. You get full credit if you turn it in and you present. Okay, the presentation class, no PowerPoints. Okay, think of the model that your boss asks you, hey, what do you think of? Okay, and that's literally what we're going to do. So you're going to just talk, preferably talk. Don't read your paper. Part of this is getting used to that part, a little bit of practice. And as a side note, make sure that you have good headphone speakers when we do that for remote, because depending on how you're doing it when you're going to be giving the presentation. So you're going to then give the presentation. I'm going to ask, it's just 2 to 3 minutes long. I'm going to ask some questions, and the questions aren't to trick you. They're not to grade you. They're basically there to just get you to think about some things that you may not have thought of before, because I'm not expecting you to be perfect in these answers. These are to get those discussions going, and everybody is able to put discussions in. So if somebody's presenting, you could throw a whole bunch of things in chat. This class is wide open. Please always throw stuff into chat if you want to do things, even snide comments and things like that. Okay, if I like them, I'll read them. If not, I won't. I'll just read them to myself. When is it due? It's due before the midterm. The midterm is week 8, so we're in week 1. You choose. Every week I'm going to ask, does anybody have a presentation? I don't care if you do it week 2, week 3, week 4. There's no bonus, no penalty. It just has to be done before week 8. Now, why week 8? Because after week 8, you get to do another one. You're going to be doing the advanced data mining technique. Same deal. You're going to be researching one technique that we don't talk about in class, and you're going to be adding that in and saying how that works. How would you use that in business? Those types of things. So the first one that you do, you're doing 2 for the semester. The first one is targeted on what is a real world example. Who did good? Who did well with all the various numbers and whatnot? How did it work across? The second one you're going to be doing on, let's kind of focus on some techniques. Okay. You'll be doing 11 different exercises. Each one's worth 3 points. There will be RapidMiner, there will be R. They will be directly out of the book. Okay, again, I have the Data Mining for the Masses version 2. That's up, and so that's good. Some of those will be using data sets from the book. Some of those you'll be finding data sets, and I'll show you some great sources for data sets, but you can find data sets anywhere. You can, and a lot of these, I'll ask you to create your own data set or find it based on almost any topic. You pick those topics. Make these things fun. Okay, there'll be a midterm. There'll be a team data mining project based in Python. And so you're going to be doing that one, and that one will be a formal presentation. We'll be doing that weeks 14 and 15. So everything is due week 14, okay? Everybody. So some people will present 14, some 15, but in fairness, everybody has the same time deadline, okay? So it's the beginning of class, week 14. And then in week 14, I will then put up who's going to be in week 14, 15. You won't know. So you need to be prepared in week 14. And then we have a final exam, which I'm trying to figure out what we'll do for that one. We had some issues with last year, and so I want to make sure that we kind of do something maybe a little different. And I'm very much, if people have great ideas, academics, great. It's all about learning. It's all about applying. It's all about that. If somebody has a clever way to do things, great. I'm not a real fan of multiple choice. I'm not a real fan of some of those things. So, what can we do that actually gets you thinking about some of these things? All right. So again, here are just the longer notes of the case study. So the first one, data mine case study, the one to week 7, one before the midterm, find data mine the real world, analyze what worked, what didn't. It's the 1 to 2 to 3 page type of thing. The hard copy gets submitted. So to get full credit, you submit the document, business memo format, and then you present it in class. If you only do the presentation, you'll only get 2 out of 5 points. If you do all of it, 5. And even if I disagree with a whole bunch, as long as you support your issues, you'll get all full credit. This is about getting you to talk. This is about getting you comfortable with some of those answers and whatnot. And how do you feel comfortable doing it? Just know your stuff. Just read it. Don't read it, one article and do it. That's why I want you to look at a couple other articles. I'm not going to be asking very difficult questions. And even when I ask a question, it's perfectly okay to say, I don't know. And that's great, okay? Because it's about getting the discussion. It's not trying to fine tune that you know absolutely every answer. You'll present it in class, 2 to 3 minutes, no PowerPoint, it's just discussion. Once you see the first one in either class, you'll see that it is not as difficult to do the presentation. Presentations are always scary, and I realize that, but no, it's not as bad as a whole bunch. Obviously, the formal one that you're going to do at the end with PowerPoint and whatnot, there's going to be a structure. That one, yes, is a little bit scarier in how we're going to do that. But what is it that you're really looking at? What are the key concepts? What was successful? What could be improved? Then we'll expand on it in the classroom type of thing. Okay. And then the same thing for the after the midterm, the same type of thing. You're going to be giving the presentation, but it's going to be on advanced data mining topics or techniques. Where are the sources for any of these, either presentation? Absolutely anything you want. I don't care where the source is. It can be blogs, it can be newspapers, it can be other classes, other topics, whatnot, other areas. Great. It's about the data mine. First half, what was successful? The second one, okay, these are some advanced techniques. What are things that we should know about? So again, find two additional sources so that way that you have some intelligence. And when you turn in the document business memo at the bottom, you just put a link to your two other sources. Okay, and that's it. Okay, it's not meant to be overwhelming as anything. You present in class 2 to 3 minutes with the key steps, and then we'll expand. Okay. So generally, when are things due? Things are going to be due. You generally they're due 1 week after I sign them. You then get 2 weeks grace, and then they are not accepted. Okay, life happens to all of us, so try and stay in sync. The classes, the issues, and things that we have. If you get too far behind, literally people that try and do everything the very last week, there's just a whole bunch of work to do. None of these projects are completely overwhelming, but if you have to do 5 of them in one night, then yes, it is overwhelming. Okay, and think of it really, what is a deadline? A deadline is important to keep everybody on the same page, especially when you have multiple groups working together. Sometimes they are actually critical. In most business, it's there to just kind of keep people going in the same direction and hopefully giving them motivation. Other ones, such as financial results and things, no, they're on a schedule. They're quarterly, semi-annual, annual, whatever the schedule is. There are some of them that you're going to work with grants and business, whatnot, where there is a drop dead date and they don't get around. The one that I would kind of my eye-opening experience is I attended a bid meeting in the middle of downtown LA, hard to get to, bad parking, had to go up. The bid opening was at 2 o'clock, so of course I got there at 1:30. And it was a bid opening for underwear and computers and cars. It was one of those where the city of Los Angeles was reviewing bids for purchasing all of these different types of things. So I'm waiting for our bid to come in, and the gentleman comes in, one of my competitors, at about 5 minutes after 2, and he turns this thing in. They go through, they do the bids, they find the computer stuff, they bid. At the very end, I asked them what was the grace period for somebody coming in, and they said 0. Okay, they don't care about parking, they don't care about elevators. You had 3 4 weeks to turn this thing in, and you're 5 minutes late. That's your problem. Okay, and so the guy that was 5 minutes late for a multi-million-dollar contract didn't even get to submit it because he had bad parking. Okay, so beware that some deadlines, whatnot, are hard and fast. In government grants, when you're looking for money, if you don't turn certain things at a certain time, the grant will go to somebody else. They are heartless, so to speak, in some of those. So something. So for example, if I assign something in week 2, it'll be due in week 3. You can turn it in week 3, week 4, week 5, but after the Thursday after class on Friday on that week 5, no longer accepted. Okay. And no assignments will be accepted after the Friday night of week 15. Okay, because we got to get everything graded. All right. And I know in some of my other university, a lot of kids are graduating. And I'm not sure where you guys are in your program. I think some of you are more senior in the program, but in the Cal State San Bernardino, some of them are graduating. So I have to get the grades in to make sure that they can graduate. So here's a general list of kind of what we're going to be going through, the discussion questions, when the various exercises are due. So week 2, we don't have any assignments. Week 3 is when the chapter 3 exercise will get assigned. And then week 4, week 5. So you're going to have a whole bunch of exercises. Just plan, yes, 1 a week. That's all we ask. You're going to be going through those, and these are all the various things. So clustering, neighbors regression, logistics, decision trees, neural networks, text mining, sentiment analysis, natural language processing, a whole bunch of various things. And all of these will also bring into AI and whatnot. We'll be doing some AI as well, as a lot of these various parts that we can work towards. And that will change a bunch. That is the general outline, but if things change, classes change, things, whatnot, one or two of the nights I may not be available. I may be traveling for some of my military stuff. If so, we will have class that week. It'll just be a recording as opposed to a live session. But you guys will know because I want to show respect for your time that I won't be canceling. If I cancel class, you'll get notice so that you don't have to travel or whatnot, and you'll be able to pick up the recording because I want to make sure that you guys are covered. Grading criteria: as a senior level student, you're expected to solve business problems. You know, when you're in high school, you're given a cookbook and say, do this exactly along these steps, get used to the pattern and kind of build that. Well, you're now at the point where no, you're supposed to know the patterns and you're supposed to be able to figure it out. And that's part of business, going through and finding the answers for yourself. Don't, and in business, that happens a bunch. Don't ask other people to do your job for you. Okay. Because if you ask questions of other people, make sure that you, and for me, it's always been, if I'm going to ask a question, I already have an idea what the answer is, or at least I've done some thought towards that answer. If I'm going to ask somebody else, they're going to give me some help. I want to be respectful of them, that they're giving their time to help me do what in effect my problem is. And the old philosophy of a monkey on your back, you have a problem, well, it's a monkey on your back. Well, I don't want to throw the monkey onto somebody else's back to be their problem. Okay. And so if they're helping, so always do your homework before you ask other people. Okay. No, you won't know anything. There aren't any dumb questions. The only dumb question is one that you can answer yourself, because if you can answer it yourself, why are you asking? Okay, content, professional image, others. One of the critical thing here is citing other people's work. Okay, it's important. When you turn in a document and you put your name on that, you're saying that this is all mine. This is all original. This is all mine. You need to be able to tell and say, no, where is the other stuff? Okay. If you're doing graphics, if you're doing paragraphs from other people, cite it. Okay. I'm not worried about spending hours and hours on pretty graphics. I'm not worried about some of these. If you bring in relevant things, cite them, because it also makes it stronger, because these are information from other possibly peer-reviewed sources. That makes your information stronger, because if you say, hey, I did all these great things, yeah, well, they may or may not trust them because of your background. Okay, they may trust it if you bring in and you're citing other sources. That means that these things have been peer reviewed, meaning other smart people have looked at it before it got published. Okay, so then those types of things are important. Okay, so make sure that you cite it. Also academic, your work is your dollar value type of thing. And so if you're taking other people's work and claiming it as your own, you're really stealing from them, okay, from an ethics point of view. And in this world, especially the digital one, you need to be very careful about ethics, especially when we talk about public safety and things like that. You have to be above the appearance of impropriety. Okay, and so yeah, things can't even look bad. Everybody has a point of view, and there's the saying that your vision is your reality. Okay, and so people believe what they see. So you need to make sure that what they see is correct, type of thing, and don't give them a reason to think negative in a lot of things that we do. Okay, presentations, when you're giving those, part of that grade, especially on your final project, is do you understand what you're presenting? If you just pick up something and read it, you don't understand it, well, it's pretty obvious, okay? Do you cover the topic completely, okay? Are you ready for questions? Okay, and there, so that you have, and some people do a PowerPoint presentation, they'll have extra slides at the end with answers to possible questions like facts and figures and things like that. You just put them at the end of your PowerPoint. You have your thank you slide, and at the end, if you had to, you go to the additional ones. The other is it doesn't make sense to the audience. Okay, you'll hear the term "dumb it down" or the 10,000 or 30,000 foot view, like you're looking at it from an airplane. Everything from an airplane, looks small and it looks kind of summarized type of thing. Sometimes we have to dumb it down to be able to explain it to people that it's not their field. Okay, the specifics of what the error means inside a regression or correlation matrix, your boss doesn't care. Your boss cares about numbers. Your boss cares about what is the impact, what is the likelihood of what you're doing correct. Are you giving somebody information that's a 50-50 shot? Is it going to be just as likely right as wrong? Or do you have some really good numbers? Because I always want you to give the error numbers. How good is this thing that I'm presenting? How good do the numbers support it? Type of thing. It still would be completely wrong, but this is what the number and the trends and because that's what numbers are. It's a trend. It's a pattern. Okay, what are the number patterns showing and explaining to us? Type of thing. So we always want to put it in their terms, and so dumbing it down and the view that some people have said is that you really know your stuff if you can make it simple for somebody else. Okay. Because if you can really understand that impact, and but true, then yes, and there are going to be nuances that, half the time we simplify things and then they say, well, what about this, this, this? And then you can expand on it. But there are going to be some parts and nuances that you may not be able to cover when you make it simple. Okay. So materials, it is the assigned is the data mining for the masses. Third version, go ahead and order it, grab it from a friend. Second edition is available up on the PDF. Preferred you get third edition. Because the assignments actually come right out of the book. Okay, all the exercises are directly out of the book. In the book, they'll have chapters and they work through a thing on classification, correlation. They work through a whole chapter with examples. They have some example questions at the end, which we're not going to use, but then they have a scenario and a exercise. That's what we're going to be doing in the class, and you're going to be doing 11 of them. So 11 chapters worth that you're going to be going through. Okay. The software that comes, so we're going to be using Excel. We're going to be using RapidMinder, which is open source installed on your PC. We're going to be using R. We're going to be using Python. All these different things can be available that we're going to be used. So they're all open source and freebie and whatnot. Tests will come from the chapter questions, the class slides, materials, class discussions. I'm going to be giving you a lot of additional information. So typically, most of the time, it all comes from the slides. I'm going to be giving you a lot of additional articles and texts and whatnot. With those, typically, I want you to read through them once or twice, and that's it, and get the comprehension, get the ideas, because a lot of times they are examples or things that will supplement what is in the slides. So to just give you kind of that being able to read it a second or third time to make sure that you understand the material that's out there. Let's see. And I'm not sure if it's still on Amazon the third. I'm not sure if it's still edition 41 or so. But anyway, typically around week 4, week 5 is when the exercises start getting a little different from number 2 to number 3. But in the notes, I say what the difference is. Usually it's a little bit more work to be done for the third version versus version 2. All right, so are there any questions? If so, please pop them into chat, speak up, whichever you'd like to do, free, free and easy type of thing. But if I don't see any, then we'll just kind of keep going on. All right. Here's the first TED Talk, Human Insights Missing from Big Data. Look at the website, it's 15 minutes. Why do so many companies make bad decisions, even accessed unprecedented data? Nokia, Netflix, ancient Greece, all these businesses we're all incredibly smart people and they still goof. Okay. And why do they still goof? And I see it a bunch in the military type things because there are a lot of organizations that are command driven, and we do things that the way from the commander, but then the person number 2 changes it, and because it's a chain of command, so I report to the person number 2 who reports to number 1. Okay, number 1 gives us direction, number 2 changes it slightly. Okay, I have to do it to one to number 2, and sometimes by the time you have 2 or 3 or 4 changes, things get kind of weird. There are a lot of things that we have to look at. I really trust in people. They are, especially organizations, typically they're trying to do the right thing. They're intelligent people, but sometimes there are things we don't know. And so we may be in the wrong. There's sometimes that are things out there that they don't know, that they're summarized in their management. They don't have experience or some information hasn't gotten passed to them. So yes, there are always going to be some oopses out there, but how can we avoid some of those as a mistake? What was interesting is my first job out of college was a group product manager. And it was kind of interesting. And for that, I really want to show the importance of human insight because we lived on automatic tools, except the group product manager was able to override everything. So typically, what it was is in this particular field, it was the world of distribution. So you'd grab everything from the manufacturers, and then the sales reps and whatnot would go out and sell it from the distributor. So nobody has to go to the manufacturer. Manufacturer is willing to give up a little bit of profit to have the distributor worry about the sales and returns and support and all those types of things. So I did that for the Western U.S. Then you had automatic tools to show when you needed to purchase inventory and when you're going to be out, because you never want to be out of inventory, but you never want to hold too much. Because in business, if you're holding inventory, you're paying dollars for it. So the less inventory I have, the better, but I want to make sure that I don't have inventory out there that is unused that I'm paying for. So we have these automatic tools. And with these tools, what they do is they do a current inventory minus the sales for the month. And that gives, okay, what our prediction is going to be for the month. And given the amount of time it takes to get new product in, so if I'm selling 100 a month and it takes 2 or 3 months to order stuff because of a lead time, I need to know when to order things to make sure I never run out. Okay. So there's a threshold order number to say, okay, at what point do I need to make sure that I have enough in inventory so that I never go to zero? Okay. And so we what is that lead time? And it's called the order point. Well, that's based on historical data, and it's not historical data is terrible if we know there's a change coming. Think of the iPhone. Okay, when do iPhones usually come out? Well, they come out the middle to end of the year, the September, October, November, depending, or the Android or whoever. Actually, Google Pixel, I think, is about ready to introduce theirs the end of August. Now, why does everybody do that? Well, in the U.S., it's Christmas season. Okay, everybody spends money towards the end of the year, and so people want phones to be available for the shopping. Okay, and so those are good things. Now, but from a automatic tool, what's going to happen to the current version of the iPhone? The current version of the iPhone is going away. And so I don't want to order a whole bunch of the current versions knowing that the new one's coming. But if we do an automatic tool, it's going to say it doesn't know any different. It's going to say, hey, the pattern is this. Okay, and so some AI is going to inject some of that additional information, but typically the simple math doesn't. So that's why we need to have human insight to understand what are trends, what are things. The tools may not understand economic recession. The tools may not understand the cost of money. With President Trump going out with tariffs, okay, that obviously is a shock to the market. Okay, the tools don't understand that. So how do we actually in that? So this is where that common sense and knowing your field and things are very important. So we understand the changes. Products going obsolete, the external different lead times, shortages cause longer lead times. We're all in an area where for a long time we were a very efficient model. But then all of a sudden, some inflation and various things happened, and right now in the U.S., the number of flights that people have is that airlines provide is way down, but they're still making money. Why? Because everybody it's inelastic in that you have to get on the plane, and so people are getting on planes, and most planes are flying fuller, which is more cost effective. Well, before they were having lots of flights that were very empty, which is very expensive. So, okay, where's that trade-off? But for us, for a service, yeah, we loved having all those different flights. Okay. And then also competition. We understand that. So it's important to get some of that knowledge in there that we have. So another one, why everyone should be data literate, information to make better decisions. And this is kind of that idea that we talked about in the data analytics class of, are we going to be an organization that is data literate? Are we going to be one that is data focused type of thing? So that's the critical parts that we have. Okay. Again, this one just short little 10-minute one. All right, so yes, here's some things to read. And no, I don't expect you to be able to read this directly off the slide. That's why we download. Okay. All right, so data is evolved in a store of value, hoard, trade, plunder. Data is the value. And actually, as we go forward with we have to trust that data. And there are going to be things that we do with the data. We're going to be building. One of the values that's going to be going forward is trusting that information. AI has a habit of being wrong because if you have 100 pieces of information and one piece is wrong, all that information is wrong. Okay, because you don't know which piece. So one of the things that's going to be valuable is creating a data set that you trust. Even then, think of there are going to be different points of view. When we look at a liberal versus a conservative, when we look at political types of things, you are more likely to believe, if you're liberal, the liberal side, you're more likely to believe the conservative if you're conservative side. So which ones are you actually listening to? So what types of data are you going to put in your collection type of thing? Okay, hopefully from a data scientist, we want it all. Okay, and we want to be able to then understand there are going to be outliers and mistakes and missing data in all of those types of things. So it circulates electronically stored info. Data is not a new phenomenon. Recent uptick. Equipment used, stored, managed, mined. Cutting edge. Data servers are simply the newest tools in evolution. And it's funny for me that the very first Apples that came out, Apple computers, were $1,000, $500 to make and $500 profit. And what's interesting is here we are 40 years later, and the computers are still roughly, for a business computer, $900 to $1,000. They just keep making them smaller, cheaper, faster. Okay, but the price point is kind of always that same. So it's kind of unusual there. So hunter-gatherers collected data using tally marks etched into bones, ancient civilizations, symbolic writings, large-scale surveys, counting devices, cryptography. Mesopotamia used cryptography to provide secrets. In cybersecurity, one of those that we referred to is the Caesar from Rome. He had his own cipher, which was interesting. And there's another one there. They wrapped paper tape around a rod, and they wrote the message on the paper tape, and they took it off the rod. So if you didn't have the rod, the paper tape wouldn't line up correctly. And so it was kind of an interesting thing. Let's see, information gathering, scientific revolution, 1543, culminating in 1687, new grand synthesis and whatnot. So kind of just read through this one, devise an image, place values, create larger units, simplify. So kind of the background of why are we really doing all of this, and how did it kind of get to where we are? Because, if you look at it, it's been amazing 200 years of the types of things that we can do, even in the last 100 years of flight, from having the first flying machines to actually then being able to make it to the moon. So being able to understand, how all of these work. So let's see. And so you can kind of read through some of that. All right. Evidence, outside phenomenon, natural political observations. Go through, I'll let you read those after scientific. Is there anything really critical that I want to worry about? Data processing in the 1950s. Well, what was interesting is from the IT perspective, data processing was in the 50s, early 60s. Then we went to decision support systems, basically the idea of that accounting system for project or for inventory to do it. So, it's one where we captured all the info, and then we actually had the info doing something. So we had management information systems, and we had decision support systems. Then we're doing some of the AI. I mean, it's interesting how it just captures and it starts giving us insight into what we can do with the data. Complexity, operate complex methodologies, algorithms, visualizations, software solutions, how it's running neural network on a GP4 cluster. Programming enables scientists to look at more sample paths than running R on a CPU to extract the same data. But again, you use the tools that you can, you make the best decisions that you can. And knowing where the information came from, given that anything recorded in data raw version, the full width sources to capture difficult. Data takes the form of everything from words to books. And we'll talk about structured and unstructured and all these things, especially, you've gotten to the point where, sound and visual is as important as the written word. And matter of fact, more so, if you look at the old acronym or the old image that saying that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Okay. And that's very true. Okay. So how do we capture that picture? And then how do we interpret that picture? All right. So internal acquisition, most reliable, accessible sort of information, internal data. We trust it. Okay. It's available. We have choice. We have systems. We can pull that in. That what is it, the internal workings? So how did it get there? What are the people? And also we're able to then vary the information and vary how we catch it because of the internal. Sign-up forms, Internet of Things, device log, web analytics, customer management systems, basically the CMS, which goes out and says, okay, how do you manage your customers? Okay, not only just sales, but what is their likes, their dislikes, the recommender systems. That's one of the things we'll look at as one of the data mining is how do we help people choose alternate things to do. Manipulate, return, customized query, exported as a CSV. So CSV, common separated values. Think of it as an Excel spreadsheet where every row is just separated by columns. And that way, a program doesn't have to worry about knowing Excel. Excel or somebody can give you a worksheet, which is like a big text document that everything is separated by columns and each record is one row. And then we know that so that when we bring it into the new system, we can work with it. Internal acquisition data has become highly automated, linked to feed regular instant flows. Very large telescope in Chile collects terabytes of info each night with 4 different telescopes named after astronomical objects in the Mapuche language. Service discoveries and track individual stars, the Milky Way. And if you're looking at that too, the Hubble telescope, which was up from one of the successes from the space shuttle, they're now doing that one's kind of reached its end of life, and they just introduced a new one to be able to look even farther out in space, which I believe are just better mirrors, better electronics, better digitalization of the things that they've done. It's amazing what happens in 20 years. All right, data acquisition, close to Earth, 24 hours a day. Effort to maintain only the value of internal data considered exhausted. An organization typically proceed to the next option of procuring data. So basically, use what you have. And this is going to be one of the discussions that we have is that idea of we have data. Okay, we can get data. What data would we like? Well, we'd like all the data. Well, some of the data we can get, some of the data we may not be able to. So you're going to be working in your organizations with a lot of systems, and some of the systems are more friendly to be able to get information out. Keep in mind that when somebody develops a program, okay, that is just logic. Okay, C or C sharp or COBOL or anything new, anything old, it doesn't matter. Those are just a way to interpret instructions, and instructions is a thought process. Well, when somebody builds that program, that is their creative work, no different than writing a novel. Okay, and so that has copyrights, and sometimes they don't want to give you the data. The data is part of that program. We run with that with database systems that they have what's called a data dictionary. A data dictionary is out there and it basically just says, hey, this is where all the information is. This is what last name looks like, this many characters, and it's this location, and I will allow these sorts of things. They have all the rules in their data dictionary. So companies will really guard that data dictionary as a business value. So when you want to do some extra stuff like extra reports and various things that we want to do, the data dictionary may or may not be available because it is in another system. Even though it's your own data, okay, it may not be available to you. Procurement. So we want to collect data, outstrips the capacity to analyze. Doesn't mean that data we need is always available. Shortage of resources, constant demand for the insight, the well-being, lead to gaps and shortages. What we can do, fill internal gaps, produce data from outside parties. There are tools to get people to do it. There are open source data sets that are out there, but then we have to work on them. And whenever we're getting data from the outside world, we have to make sure that it matches the inside world. So we're going to talk about the extract, transform, load, the idea of, okay, how do I grab this data and then make it so that it matches my data? Because maybe think about a Richter scale. Okay, we just had the major earthquake, and I wonder if you felt it at all. The major earthquake up in Russia, that's a Richter scale is logarithmic. Okay, and so that a 5, a scale of 5 is 10 times more than a 4, which is 10 times more than a 3. So a 5 is 100 times more than a 3. Well, if that's a logarithmic scale, does that logarithmic scale match what my scale is for my data? And because my data may be just normal 10 by 10s, just a normal number type of thing. Procurement under sharing agreements, purchased outright from third party. The Amazon Turk marketplace for data-related tasks for deduplication and whatnot, which is the idea of taking duplicates out of a data set and just saying this one's a dupe. Okay, I'm keeping it, but just saying it. So, say you have, and we do this with backups in Windows a whole bunch. In backups, deduplication says, "Hey, I got a window, I got a picture. Do I need to back up that exact same picture every night, even though the picture doesn't change?" No. Okay. Once I have one backup, I say, "Yep, I still have a backup." And so the deduplication becomes a flag. So I don't have to keep the whole thing. So in the Mechanical Turk and some of these data collections, deduplication says, nope, it's a duplicate. I already have it. You keep a count. You don't throw it away because it's important to know how many duplicates you have, but you just add kind of a tally mark to say, yep, it's a duplicate. Let's see. Other ones, we have Fiverr and Upwork. You can source contribution 100,000 from request. Melbourne use Canva to share with the university how they use Amazon Interact to outsource image preference surveys, number of things that are out there. So data validation, another commonly outsourced crowdsourcing, translation of text to another language, difficult task for in-house to verify. And again, I go back to, what is Spanish? Well, okay, which of 20 different versions are you going to do? They're very similar and they typically can all understand each other, but certain words and if we look at the King's English versus American's English, the word for elevator is lift. Okay, they're obviously words that are common. They're just used a little bit differently. Okay. So how do we make them equate? So automatic tools, fast translating the queries, tend to overlook the nuance of human errors, misspelled, key variants, exemplified search queries for football club Manchester City. Trends indicate that Man City is common search, higher in volume than Manchester City. Google Translate doesn't always translate the true intent. Okay, it makes assumptions, it makes oopses. And that's where you and I need you to develop kind of that common sense that we're going to do. Okay, the above translations, only French and German are correct. We're turning English with no direct translation. As for the incorrect translations, typical task for human help. The authors of Human Plus, reimagining, whatnot, describes fertile space where humans and machines collaborate to exploit the other's strengths. Okay. So it's kind of intriguing to how they kind of put together. We'll take a break in just a minute. If you're unsure about pricing on MTurk, it's set to set a price, a value. So because you're asking people to do things, and there was one that I think somebody said they would have things do just for a couple pennies type of thing. So it's all up to you what you want to do. All right. And I think at this point, we'll go ahead and we'll take a 10-minute break. So right now, it is, let's see, 10:44. So let's come back at 5 minutes till the hour, and then we'll go. If you have any questions, please ask, and I will go ahead and just pause the recording. And thank you out there. The one student was able to put the link up in chat for the RapidMiner download. There are going to be some, but don't worry about it as much until you actually see the assignments and whatnot, because the Python won't be for a while, type of thing. So as you look through the notes, whatnot, you'll be fine, whatnot. So we've got about an hour, a little bit under an hour. So we're gonna crank through this other set. I'll let you do a lot of the reading. There isn't a whole bunch of magic in this. It's just stuff you need to be familiar with. So I don't think we need to do a whole bunch, but there's some things that I highlight in that they're interesting, like this one. In country alternate data to overcome absence of a formal credit rating. China, country where 60% never owned a credit card, aren't eligible for credit. Some finance providers issue credit based solely on the input of alternative data. Alipay allows users to market credit-based purchases on e-commerce run by Alibaba based on the makeshift credit score, based on spending habits. So, finding this data, this is the data mining. How are we going to be creative? Because that's one of the interesting things is your boss is going to look at you. You're supposed to be the best and brightest. You're going to come out. You're going to come with all these ideas of how you're going to change the world. And they look at people like me with gray hair and they say, no, you're too rooted in the past. And you won't come up with all these new ideas. So, yep, here are all these new ideas. So they're vetting for other personal info, feed credit scores, records, cheating, national university exam, public transport convictions. So some of the negative impacts or a negative type of thing. So beyond real estate, the Dutch startup tracks gentrification, changing neighborhoods, bringing in wealthier residents, investment, development, all those various things contain time lags. Because things like that, that's a long version. We've seen that in New York, which went from a minority neighborhood in Harlem to a very up and coming type of thing. But those types of things can take 10, 15 years. So what is data? And how often are you collecting it? So we have influenza tracking, all these various things, crop prediction. So kind of look through some of those, read these ones. Open data is all governments are trying to make all this data available, and all this data is available. And the insight is that if we make data available, somebody will be able to do something with it. Problem is, a lot of that data is just general purpose data. Nobody's been able to figure out a way to actually gain insight. So that's where some of the data mine, we need to look at this and figure out what is some of this insight that we have. And there is the website called Kaggle.com. That one is a website where I'd recommend you take a look for your projects. When you do your projects, and we'll talk more about them in the next couple of weeks, because we got lots of time. But those will be the databases that are out there, the data sets from all these different organizations on all these different topics. And what you do with it can be very unusual. And if you can add AI and do all these other things, then even better type of thing. So artificial data sets, great for beginners, well organized, ready for immediate use. With messy data, when they talk about real live data sets, it's messy in that you have data from multiple sources that we have to fix, and then we have missing values. And we'll talk about that, because what happens when data isn't there, how that affects your averages and things like that. One of the interesting things too is they talk about compliance. Biggest things that we've got going forward, the European Union has created privacy laws, and if you violate the privacy laws, you literally can get fined. But you'd think, hey, you're in Vietnam. How would you be affected by the European? Well, if you're working with a company that is doing business in Europe, you are now held to the European standard. And they have some real teeth in some of those. The Chinese law is similar, and I believe the Vietnamese is based on the Chinese. California has one that is more European than the United States. Typically, California, having a large tech industry, tends to be a little bit farther advanced on a lot than most of the other 50 states type of thing. So PII, personally identifiable information, you want to make sure that in theory, what info are you keeping? What should you be keeping? There are a whole bunch of rules, and we'll be going over a lot of those rules that we have. So how are we following some of those standards? And one of the problems we have is that inadvertently you can capture data sets that will give information with data mining and be able to find the individual person. So you would think that in, what was it though? One of them, they say, including zip code when completing credit card, procuring data lead to legal, prevalence intermediates, pushing personal data, political affiliation, health status. And then when you're able to put all these things together, you're actually able to identify an individual person. And that's the no-no, okay? That's the one that we don't want to do. It needs to be personally identifiable for a reason. Let's see, disclosing sexual preferences, part of a 2007 Netflix prize data set. Despite the best attempt to remove personal identifiers, names of individuals, personal identifiers revealed by matching the competition's data set with film ratings from the publicly available data set. So they were able to identify the anonymous user's rating of 6 obscure movies to be able to find that with an 84% success rate. So that's kind of scary, okay, and how they do it. And I've seen people where they would go in and there was one instance of a researcher, he would ask their name, they would go into a coffee shop, come back out, and by the time they had their coffee and come back out, he knew everything about them. And so it was kind of scary. So web scraping, time armor technique, collection from the web code, automated. So there are a lot of tools out there, whether it's video, audio, text. They will go out and do the search engines. You'll hear the term web crawler if you haven't heard that. And that's the programs that literally go website to website for Google and Yahoo and whatnot. And they're the ones that build the internet. And they're the web crawlers, the program that goes, finds all the website and finds the content. But what is it finding content on is the question. Okay. Let's see, good basic program to automatically export info into a CSV written in 40 lines of code. A whole bunch of tools that are out there, and as we go, especially with AI, that'll make it even easier. So we download, then we extract the useful segments, we store them on various with normal files, and then we can do the service to put them together. So it's incredible what the tools are. So we need to know how they used, and in effect, you also need to know how to protect against them. Because as I teach my computer policy class, okay, for security, how do we identify that so that we know that we're not going to be out of compliance? Because that's you go into these organizations, you need to be able to tell your company, hey, these are issues that we may need to address. Okay. So basically, some general purpose data mining, because we went some interesting issues there with that first set. But people's lives, informed decision, data is knowledge. Okay, because we have points in data, we have the patterns, and then we're able to create the knowledge and the wisdom from those. So evidence, assumptions, abstraction lead to wasted resources. Stop molehills from turning into mountains. So monitor health of systems, quality monitoring, get the results that we want. Strategy you put in. Now, you have to be careful. There's a philosophical thing that when you find what you're looking for, you stop. So, for example, the old adage, you always find something in the last place you look. Well, yeah, because you stopped looking. Well, a lot of times people will identify, and once they see what they think they want to see, they stop. Okay, but is that truly the case? Do we have that? The one I love, there was one TV show or whatnot. They were talking about it, and they made a great analogy, and they basically said, "Hey, if that the study proves that this medicine is incredible. Okay, great. That's one study. How many studies said that it wasn't? There are 20, 30, 40 studies that weren't, but only one study worked. Okay, how do we do that when we talk about getting the results that we want? Find solution to problems. So these are visualizations, relationships, trends that we're going to doing. And we're going to talk about causation and correlation. Okay, something is caused. That means cause and effect. And that, in physics, you heat something up and it melts. Okay. Correlation is the idea that things happen at the same time, but we don't necessarily know why. So we have to have the theory and some of those things. So we need some humans in there to be able to do that. Because otherwise, if we just go in correlation, in the data analytics, we talked about polio and the fact that people thought polio was caused by ice cream and swimming because it went higher in summer because everybody's more interactive. Summer, it's like the flu. More people are interactive and seeing each other, you tend to spread the flu more. Okay, when you are outdoors and or maybe a little bit less. If you're indoors, you're compacted, you may spread it more. So it's one of those where there are other reasons for that. Data is backing up your arguments. It's not just because you said. There's actually trend. There are actually some things there. Instead of the guessing game, help you explain good and bad decisions. There's some support. Okay, that hey, this is a reason that we do it. It's just not the crazy guy over there in the corner saying that we should do certain things. Okay, and it's also efficiency and effective data. So getting the right data, effective data analysis allows you to use direct source resources where they're most needed. Okay, so that where is it? And this is finance and marketing and whatnot. Where's our biggest bang for the buck? Okay, where is it that we're going to be able to do the most cost effective and make the most money? Because what is our job? Our job is to make money for the company owner, the shareholders, for government and the public to be efficient, where we want to root out corruption and identify that where there are weird things going on. So we want to be strategic in the approaches. Know where we're doing well, okay? Replicate the areas of strength, but also be able to identify the very famous People Drucker was a management analyst, very famous. And he's got a college of business named after him at Claremont University. And his famous comment was, you can't improve something unless you can measure it. Okay, so how do we know we're doing better? Okay, keep track of it all, benchmarks, baselines, goals. Whatnot. Again, that build on how we're doing it. Make the most of your money. Funds and driven outcome and data driven. So, okay, So, are you doing the most cost-effective things that we said earlier? All of these reasons are very much related and build on each other. And then access the resources around you. Okay, experts need to begin analysis. HR probably attracts data about staff, already reporting data regarding incidents to the state oversight. So we need to be able to find this data within. And we have inside businesses silos. Okay, if you look at a farm, they'll have a silo where they store corn, and there's a different one for wheat and a different one for oats. These tall towers, and they're basically just big cabinets. I mean, they're just big containers, but everything is kept separate. Problem we have is that in IT, the organizations, HR has their silo, and marketing has their silo, and the facilities people have their silo. So these are completely separate systems, and so disparate. And so how do we get that information out of all of these different systems to be able to analyze and how they're related and correlated and things like that? Okay. All right, so human readable information, only humans can interpret image, meaning of a block or text. AI is getting better. We'll actually use AI to look at and identify whether pictures are puppies or cats type of thing. So AI can help turn some of the human readable into machine readable because it's structured information that computer programs can access. In order for a program to perform instructions, the data must have some kind of uniform. The great example, I like this one here because it's little known, but it's earth-shattering in effect, and it's from the 1800s. There was huge numbers of data about ocean currents and shipping logs and things, and so all the various things and all this literally machine and coordinated routes and whatnot. So this is back in the 1800s, the version of big data of where do all the ships go type of thing. So he's the founder of motion oceanography. So his study gave him detailed about currents, winds, weather patterns. So the guy that, in effect, you get the equivalent of the jet streams and the currents, and the fact that the currents in the Pacific go one way in the northern hemisphere and they go the opposite direction in the southern hemisphere. And how can we take advantage of that? If you look at airplane flights, they do that in the air using jet streams. Okay, what is it? So standard practice carry logs, systematic study, logging. So in 1844, it became the direct compiled all the data and published in 1847. So the part that I find incredible is think about the reducing travel time from 183 to 135, reducing it by 2 months. That's incredible. Think about the time, the dollars. Think about that crew that has to be fed for 2 months. That's how much dollars you're saving. Today, it's no different than somebody going from Asia to Europe and using the Suez Canal as opposed to going around the Horn of Africa. I mean, the idea that we're having the rebellion and the Houthis and some of that, so some of the people are not able to send stuff through the Suez Canal. That's a huge cost that adds 2,000 miles. So here we're able to figure this out. And before, there was no pattern. Ships sailing from Britain to Australia reduced travel time from 128 to 97. So 30 days. I mean, that's an incredible amount of time that they do. And it's understanding. World War II, every ship ran completely on its own. And then the Germans, using the U-boats, were able to sink all these different ships because they were all by themselves. Once they did convoys, they were able to protect. So once you find these patterns, once you're able to do it, you're able to kind of make these things together. In this case, it did the recognized sea lanes. So personal data, anything specific to you, demographics, location, email. So normally when we talk about PII, people forget that your location is technically PII. People in theory shouldn't track where you are. Okay, if you're out in public, that's one thing, but depending where you are, depending which country you're in, some of those issues that can be controversial. Okay, email, credit card, giving away personal data, provide personal, and your generation is more than willing to do that in some of the blogs and pictures and TikTok and things like that. All that information is captured. Mine tends to be a little bit more cynical, and we don't give out that information as often, but we're also not using some of those tools, and these tools require that. And part of that is the trade-off. Okay, we all love Google because Google's free. We all love Facebook. Facebook is free. But how are they actually paying for that? There's a business model. Okay, they're grabbing that information and monetizing it. Okay, so how do we do this trade-off between what is personal data and monetized versus the level that it gets monetized? Okay, personal data aggregated, sold to other countries for advertising, competitive research. All right. Transactional, anything requires an action to collect, add, purchase, make a purchase, the site. Every website collects transactional data. Google Analytics and my other class will do the Google Analytics exercise to actually use Google Analytics. Okay, transaction data important because it helps them expose variability, optimize operations. Years ago, we had the field called operations research, and that was the one that before AI or any of those would say, okay, what is the most efficient route to route trucks? Okay, what is the most efficient route to do mechanical engineering inside a factory? Okay, all of those types of things are basically transactional data systems. Web data, any data that you might pull from the internet, part because one of the major businesses can access info. Type of thing can be used to monitor competitors, track potential customers, whatnot. It's incredible the amount of data. So we have web scrapers that will go out and grab that info. Okay, when we hear the term JSON, JavaScript, JSON, that is basically it's a format, and just like CSV, it's a format to be able to put data into. And when we talk about some of these, it's kind of almost like a black box. You say, well, my system will put out a JSON and it will read a JSON. And from a technical point of view, that's all we need to know. Okay. And that we don't have to actually understand all the bits and bytes necessarily. Now, if we need to do some very funky things with them, then maybe we do. But for a lot of us as a lot of these different standards come out, they become pretty much cookie cutter. They're kind of interchangeable. Sensors, we got sensors all over the place. Okay, and the more sensors you have, the more cameras every year for whether they're Wi-Fi, they're cameras, all the earthquake sensors. When we're worried about tsunamis, there are buoys throughout the world in the oceans that measure the ocean height. And so if the ocean height changes by I don't know how many centimeters that it does, then it knows it's a wave. So that's how they're able to track a tsunami coming through it. These buoys will go up because a tsunami in the middle of the Pacific Ocean is only a foot tall, a couple feet tall, because of the depth. It's when it gets dangerous is when it gets so close because all that energy in water, it doesn't disperse through the whole level, and so it's going to disperse different through a mile depth water versus 100 feet versus 10 feet of water type of thing. AirAsia saved 350 by using sensors technology to reduce operating costs, increase aircraft usage. Okay, how do we get more bang for our buck? Ships and planes aren't making money unless they're moving. Okay, if you're moving passengers in an airplane, yes, you're paying for fuel, you're paying for staff, whatnot, but you're making money. When an airplane sits on the ground, it does not make any money. When a ship is not moving between places, it's waiting to offload, it's losing money because it could be moving equipment and getting paid. All right, so everything, technically all data contribute to big data, no official size that makes something big. Typically for me, big data is when I have to start using other techniques to do it. If I can put it all in a spreadsheet or a database, then it's not big data. But if I have to use multiple tools to do things, then it's big data. Let's see, analysts start to use it, online books, music videos, increased amount of sensors, sounding, the huge amount, and where we talk about we're at first are megabytes, and then we had gigabytes, and now we have terabytes, and we have petabytes, and petabytes aren't uncommon. And so we're getting up there in amount of management and data that we have to do that, look at your flash drives, how much bigger your flash drives keep getting. Process which data gathered and measured, high quality research, no answers, lingering questions, data collection usually done with software. And we're going to talk about data collection and decisions and missing and metadata. Worried about how do we make sure data is appropriate and how do we make sure data from sources matches? How do we make sure that we take care of the missing data? Because anytime missing data, it's information, and information is missing. It could be information, it could be average information, it could be bad information. But if that information is missing, we don't know. Okay. So big data, 5 U's it's used, mobile maps and GPS, a bunch folded on the dashboard of your car. You never get lost on the trip, MapQuest, multi-start business trip, satellite GPS to find out where we are and stuff. And right now it's kind of interesting that they were doing a legal case against Google because some people had marked that a Google map was wrong and Google had not fixed it yet, and a number of people had run off the end of the road. No, you still have to operate your vehicle. This is one of those that's kind of silly. It's not it's not necessarily their fault. When you drive a car, you are responsible for the safe operation. If people get in front of you, if a pedestrian, if it has road construction, things like that, they're all responsible. If they're saying no, it's Google's fault because they never fixed their map and the road stopped and Google said the road continued. No, you're the driver. You know, you can't blame everybody else for something. Okay. All right. So let's see. Take it on. Public cases. Okay. Online shopping, big growth, the data, real change, big data from the moment you begin your search. Now, one of the key things to understand too about shopping is our marketplace has drastically changed. And this is a really important thing to understand because this is a business value and understanding the business part of this. When we've moved from a retail brick and mortar store to an online store, one of the things is that we don't have as much we don't have as much product in the marketplace. Okay, when I had 5 stores, okay, I had to stock all 5 stores. Now I have a distribution center, and the tool or the product comes directly from the distribution center. I don't have as much in each one of those stores, so my costs are a lot less. Okay, now when we talk about emergency management, well, that means everything is not in the stores, it's all at the distribution center. So if I need something today, I can't get it. You know, oh, you can have it tomorrow. I'll get it to you overnight. Well, there's certain things I need today because something broke and I have to have it today. So those are nice when we have the stores locally. But so it's changed the model. But what's interesting too is that when a business received a product to sell, they would go to the distribution, then they pay to the store. Now they have you pay for it to get it shipped from the distribution center, so they don't have to handle it as much. So it's interesting the different impacts that we have from a or a response to online shopping, to everything going. And one of the big things that I noticed is a lot of the little mom and pop shops, the little people that did really custom things that really sometimes made little towns and downtowns and shopping communities really neat because everything was unique. They're not available. They're all only available online. It's too expensive to have some of the brick and mortar because in any one location, you don't have enough people going through. So these are some of the things that kind of change how we do some of the technology and that impact on the business from this. So then how we look at it from a data mining point of view. So data mining, big data, accurate transport, again, kind of like my corporate product example, you know, are we guessing right to have the right information in the right place? If we look at car dealers were really interested because they want to have, if they have more sales, they have more cars. And what they found is that in the past, people would do dealer trades and you would wait for a car and whatnot. Today, they don't. People come in, you have my car? Nope, I'm going to go someplace else. So car dealers want to have as many cars and they want to be able to predict. And if they do dealer trades where they want a car with certain things on it for the customer and they'll give the other dealer some other car, well, the other dealer doesn't want your trash. They don't want the car that's not going to sell. So it's an intriguing thing of how do we do this and use big data to support the business goals that we're trying to do. Okay, let's see. Urban planning, smart cities plan urban, how cities function, and cities are changing. Okay, and the cities that are very compact, and I don't know how you describe the cities in Vietnam, but if you look at cities in Europe, typically they're 500 years old. The streets are tiny because they were built off the ox carts in the paths and whatnot. You drive around Scotland and whatnot, the walls on the sides are 300-year-old stacked stone, and you're driving 50 miles an hour, 50 or 100 kilometers, whatever, right next to these things. It's pretty scary when you're driving that fast next to it. And so in the US, it tends to be a lot wider open. Why? Because especially in California, we're a car culture. And so it's very flat and open. We don't have natural barriers like rivers and oceans and things that we have lots and lots of space. A friend of mine grew up in the island of the Bahamas. And so you're talking an island, I don't know, 30 miles long by 5 miles wide or something like that. And he grew up there and he was just fascinated when he came to work here in California, where he would literally drive for hours on a desert and see nothing but desert. And it was just kind of where he was used to that would be just miles of ocean type of thing. So it's a lot different. Energy consumption, self-regulate energy consumption. How do we do it with smart meters? And as we go solar, as we do some of these, that impacts and changes how we measure it, how we use the dollars, all those various things that we have. And then wearables, wearing a device monitors activity, sleep, great to keep on top of the health, write down the journals and whatnot. So we're seeing it. But big data is actually wrong. What was interesting is you have in a military, you have generally fairly young people that tend to be more health conscious, more active type of thing. So one of the great stories was there was a military base in Africa that was confidential or secret. And all of a sudden, on all these maps from the people that do wearables, they were doing this great marketing thing to show where are all the people wearing our watch or whatever the wearable thing was. And there's this high concentration in the middle of the jungle in Africa. Gee, I wonder what that meant. Okay, it meant that there was a secret base there. Okay, so that was kind of intriguing. So how do we kind of do this? So technology. So they're good and they're bad. All of these things. So structured versus unstructured, basically clearly defined data types with patterns, searchable, while unstructured is everything else. Because you don't have a way to describe. Okay, if for example I give you an audio file, okay, what language is it in? Okay, no, well the system just knows it's an audio file. They may not be able to interpret what's on that audio file. Where a structured database says, hey, I can understand it because you told me it's last name. You told me this is first name. You told me I have that information. But something that's an audio file, no, I have this 100 megs of a recording of a class from a crazy professor in California. Okay, I can't tell and differentiate the data within that crazy file. Okay, let's see. Select one or two. Data structured applications use them. Relational databases for structured data, typically a lot of others. As we look at new database types, the NoSQL, you'll hear that term. So non-SQL databases, they're basically doing better for unstructured data. And so we're looking at seeing a number of those. But when we talk about SQL, simple query language, those databases, relational databases, they're going to be like cockroaches in that even if we have the nuclear everything, that everything on the planet dies, the cockroaches will still be here. Well, if everything in the planet dies, SQL will still be here. SQL is something that's so ingrained in so many companies and countries that as we migrate to some of the better tools, it won't be that quick. Businesses are very risk adverse. They don't want to do a change unless they see a dollar value. One, it's a cost. Hey, I don't want to change stuff if I'm not going to make extra money because I don't have enough time to do the stuff I need to do. So we're going to be doing, as a business, they do these costs. They don't just experiment on these types of things. So why would I want to go to NoSQL if I'm not going to get a business value out of doing that? Well, you could do all these great things. Well, that's your job when you go out and you go to these companies is define that business value to be able to make it worth their while. And again, they don't want risk because risk is failure. Into a business, risk is money. Okay, risk is, okay, if I have to pay extra insurance, if I have to pay extra things, if I have to pay extra people. Think of all the projects that you've ever heard of that get delayed. Okay, that those projects are out there and they say, hey, this one ran into this project and this delay and it's going to be 6 months later and this building is going to take an extra 2 months. Okay, all of those are a significant cost because all those people still have to be paid. Okay, all those equipment, all that stuff. My dad was a structural engineer, and so his job was to develop the statistics, the plans, and all the things that the architect needs to actually build the building, all the sizes of the beams and whatnot to make sure that it stands up due to wind and tsunami and rain and earthquake and fire, all those things. But a structural engineer doesn't get paid until after the building is done. So a structural engineer may not get paid for a year and a half, 2 years. And if the project gets delayed out, then they may not even get paid, but they still have to pay their people. One of the biggest things that you bump into in business is cash flow. I have to pay a person. I don't care how much my profit is. I need money coming in to be able to pay my people. If I don't have money coming in, I have to take a loan, which then I have to pay interest. So cash flow is an incredible part of having any company. My dad's being literally waiting a year to 2 years. Hopefully you have enough projects that are finishing to pay for other projects. But there are some points that, that he had no money coming in, but he had to still pay his people. Okay, so it's a very difficult thing. So as we build on some of these, understanding that business. So we have the structured data usually resides in relational databases, field store length data, social security, zip codes, first name, last name, all those various things that we have. Uh, ATM to activity, relational store, point to point, unstructured data is customer relationship, integration awkward at best, memo fields don't lend their self to traditional. So you can kind of read through that. So for example, campaign name, date, structure to describe the organization into a format well defined, easily able to retrieve. Rows and columns, relational or tabular spreadsheet are common for storing structured data, data of a Kickstarter in a tabular form. Okay. Same time, add horizontal columns, which basically are different fields to the record. So if we think of it as an Excel spreadsheet, all the rows are records, all the columns are the actual fields. So if you just took and did that line and made 6 lines and with extra del, it looked like Excel spreadsheet. Okay. Okay, but again, this is where we've categorized everything, and I can find these things based on the category. That's structured. So calculate the average success rate of projects, outcomes 1/3, tally the number of pledgers, 332, generate a pledgers to target funding. Okay, 332 to 22,000 or 226,000 type of thing. Okay. Unstructured is everything else, okay? Internal, but it's not structured, predefined. So, in other words, it may be text, non text, human, machine generated, all these various things. So, okay, what exactly is out there? And you can see through the list of email, social, website, mobile, communications, media, business applications. Yes, there's an incredible amount of human generated stuff because, think of your documents. Think of that of a class document where we grab all of these and everybody's writing styles are different and they're written on different topics. So how do I grab all that data and how do I define it? How do I sort that data to understand and categorize it? And so that's kind of one of the critical parts. Where it's structured, I got categories. I already have fields laid out that I can play. Machine generated, unstructured, satellite, scientific, digital, sensors, and then big data type of thing can be both. Okay. All right, so usually business, increase more tools. The cons, lack of data flexibility. Once it's in the database, that's there. You have to do it. And that's why we pay database people, PeopleSoft and some of those big bucks because they are managing that data and it's very structured and they have to reset data, add data, modify it, get access to it. There are a lot of people that do a lot of work with SQL, and that's why that's a very lucrative field to get into is to be a database analyst, especially in SAP, PeopleSoft, one of those. That's the $150,000, $200,000 a year job. All right, so freedom of data, faster accumulation rates, unstructured data accumulated, no need to predefine, so we get it all. The data lake, we'll talk about data lake, data mart, data those, all those different categories of how we sort data, specialized tools, all those various things that those are all good things for unstructured data. Okay, kind of a combination between the two. All right, so what's the difference? Storing outside of one, biggest difference is ease of analysis. Analytics tools for mining unstructured are beginning, okay, that we haven't quite figured out. And really, what are those tools? Those tools are going to be AI, okay, because you and I can see modern, where humans do well, we fix things, okay? Computers can't necessarily fix things, but, as we get to AI looks out and it understands all the concepts. It understands a number of things, but it can't be smart. It looks for patterns and tells you patterns, okay? For you and I, when you have that great idea, that's a jump that the synapses and things that we haven't created that inside systems. I'm sure it's coming, and that's scary because then computers will think for themselves, okay? And there's some great science fiction things that basically said, or science fiction shows that set out in space. I think one of the episodes, Star Trek or something, that basically said, "Hey, the machine said humans were difficult, so we got rid of the humans." It's kind of, ooh, well, no, I could actually see that. That's kind of scary. Okay. Unstructured data makes 80% of enterprise, growing at a rate 55, 60% per year. Dollars, managing it. Okay, that's credible stuff. And that's one of our biggest issues in IT is cloud. Okay, how do I manage cloud? Because cloud computing is very expensive because you have to pay to put it up, you have to pay to leave it there, you have to pay every time you use it. Okay, and so people just put lots of stuff up there and they just leave it there and it gets expensive because you pay for it all every month. All right, semi-structured internal tags, markings, identified separate data elements, think of hashtags. Both documents, database, semi-structured, data, only 5 to 10% of the data pie. Critical usages. Email is very common. For me, emails are incredible. You look at your email, everything about the 7 W's, the how, what, why, when, or what, that's all in your email because you look at the date, you look at who it's from, you look at the subject line, all that information is in there. So it's pretty incredible. So some additional, you're going to hear the term XML, extensible markup language. Basically, it looks like HTTP. It looks like, or I'm sorry, HTML. It looks like the same language you use to write the web, and we can write websites in XML. But when we have systems that don't talk to each other, we use XML as an intermediate step. So something will write it to XML, and then we'll use XML to input to the other system. So we need to, it's a structured document because it basically says, what the variable name is, and then the variable number, and then what's the new name, and then what's the number, and then it goes, okay, now we'll do record number 2. Okay, and so it's very verbose in what it does, but because it's very verbose, every system has all the information it needs to figure out what it needs. Okay, open standard Java. Okay, the JavaScript object notation. There it is, JSON. Okay, it includes the name, like C, it's structured name, value pairs, hashtags, various things. Okay, the most important for us is that if we have to save it in JSON, great, save it in JSON. And when we use it in JSON. We just kind of leave it at that. Okay. Do we really care what is every 0 and 1? Maybe, but probably not. Okay. Then we have not only SQL, additional because they don't separate organs into the table, and there are a whole bunch of advantages. And we spend weeks talking about NoSQL versus SQL in my database class. Okay. NoSQL is the operational database hosts native analytic tools for business intelligence. In Hadoop, NoSQL is ingest, manage, and serve up the analytics results. All right. Let you read through all of those because we're running out of time, and this is going to happen every time. One of my expectations is you guys to look at the slides beforehand, especially if English is not your strong suit. I know some people have a little bit stronger English than others. That way we can really highlight, and I don't have to read every slide to you. I really want to respect you and highlight the things that are important, and I want your discussions because as we have 50 people doing 2-minute discussions, that's a lot of time. Okay, and so the slides, typically I try to make them as straightforward as I can. There we go. All right. Critical thing, metadata, data about data. Okay, where did data come from? How good is that data? That's what we really want about metadata. What was the author? What was the date? If something is a Internet of Things, what was the sensor that picked it up? What was the version of the sensor? How good was that sensor? What are the significant digits? All those things, and they're all, but if you create a Word doc, it's amazing how much data is created. Who was the author? What was the word profile, the subscription? What was the date stamp? All those things. What was the version of Word? All those things are included with that Word doc. So the metadata, which is important. It's stored. Think of metadata with a picture, the date and location that you have. Okay, title, subject, genre, the rights, the technical, the preservation, the markup language. All those various things can be out there. Okay. So the website searches, all the common metadata terms, building web meta title, the description, further info, and so whatnot. So metadata include the language a page is written in, whether it's HTML, HTML version what, XML, all those things. So all these different searches, there are keys out there that we can use to basically pull things together. Okay. And we'll kind of skip through theirs. You can kind of read through these. All right. But think of it as metadata is data about data. Okay, it's not the data itself. So we care about the author and creation. The data is actually the Word doc and what's inside the Word doc. All right. All right. So let's go in. Okay. So let's talk about data mining. Okay. Knowledge discovery in data. So knowledge discovery data, KDD. Uncovering patterns, other valuable information. One of the critical things, and let me say this now, and I probably say it every week, what is actionable? Okay, what is it? We want to do a study, and all these things that we're doing, why do we care? Okay, what is the value that we're doing this? So what is the results that we're going to be able to give to business? So that's one of the critical parts that we have in data mining. Involved to handle data at large scale, improved organizational decision making, either describe the target data set or predict outcomes, use of machine learning. We'll talk about that. Used to organize, filter data, surfacing the most info from fraud detection, user behavior, bottlenecks, all these various things. Okay. So a number of steps. So basically, and we talked about this with the other class for data exploration, very similar, data collection to visualization. Okay. We want to get the data. We want to fix the data. We want to analyze the data. We want to get the results. And we want to be able to visualize the results. Okay. And then we go back and do it again. Okay. What worked? What didn't work? Okay. Then we're going to do it. Describe data, the observations of patterns, associations, correlations, and association and correlation are different. Okay, and we're going to make sure that we understand the difference between them. They sound the same, but they are different. Classify and cluster data through classification regression. Identify outliers. What is that weird thing? We use outliers when we look for spam. What is weird? Okay, well, that's spam. Okay, then we can do that. All right, so set the business objectives. Okay, data prep, model build it, and typically I even recommend using multiple models. Okay, and this is important because each model gives us a little bit different information. So when you do your project, you're gonna actually do a couple different models and see what are the results of each one of those models. And one model may be better. And I've had a lot of projects where people said, well, I expected this model to do it, but this other model went better. Clustering was better than regression. Okay, let's figure out why. Okay, that's the important thing. There's some meaning there that is important for us to know. And then evaluation. So model build and then evaluation of results. So then the various common techniques, I'll let you read through the details, but association rules, neural networks for building the smart systems and whatnot, mimicking the human brain so that we get nodes and layers, and through each layers we have rules that will then build upon each other. Decision trees predict potential outcomes based on decisions. That's been around for absolute years. That was the first remote medicine. Do you have a fever? Yes or no? Okay, well, if you don't have a fever, does it hurt? There are a whole bunch of decision trees, yes, no's, that you're able to do. Nearest neighbor clustering algorithm. Basically, we put a whole bunch of dots on the wall. That's the first thing. Is there a line? Are there groups? Well, if they're groups, then we're going to look for nearest neighbors. What is this pattern? Why are these things in a group? Okay. So some of these things extract the use cases: sales, education, operation, fraud detection, incredible things that are out there. We have another TED Talk for you, another 10 minutes, nice, straightforward. How big data that actually matter. Catch criminals scene of the crime, not years later. Reroute in real time to prevent traffic. So it's kind of interesting to see this one. So this next group, about 10 slides or so, one of the key things is we are wrong. Okay. These are all trends. These are analysis. Okay. How do we get and figure out that what is right and what is wrong? Okay. And so going through this, then you'll find a number of examples of prediction errors. And some of these are straightforward. One or two of these I need to explain. So the Beatles, the Business Week failure of Japanese cars, the US car market was all based on cars should only last 100,000 miles and then you buy a new one. The Japanese were entering the market. They had, after World War II, they had very poor quality, that they focused on quality. So all of a sudden their cars are lasting 200, 150, 200, 300,000 miles, and American cars are only lasting 100. And Americans didn't figure that out in the marketing. So the Japanese got very strong inroads, and that's where Toyota still has that incredible quality image. J.K. Rowling, okay, female author. She picked the name J.K. because she was afraid that a magical book from a female author might not be as accepted. So she did that. Right, one of those. IBM messed on the photocopier because they were selling tons of photocopiers and they didn't expect it to be as well. Ken Olson, the future of TV, just messing up. There are a lot of things out there that we did. We talked about this a bunch in the Monday class for those. It's identical to the things that we talked about then. But the one I wanted to add is the election predictions. This is the first Trump election that was a surprise. The last Trump election was not a surprise. This one was, and part of it is people found the wrong data. They were asking the wrong people, they were asking the wrong questions. And with that, they got the wrong results. So everybody, all these surveys, whatnot, said that Hillary Clinton was going to become the next president. She was going to win in a landslide practically. And they didn't ask the right questions. And in a lot of cases, people that were voting for Trump didn't like Clinton, but they were embarrassed. So they didn't necessarily say the truth. So it was kind of interesting to see how that science kind of looked, and what are the correct things they do? What is the level of accuracy that they did? So how many people were they polling? But the critical thing that they make in one of these is not this, I guess the next page. They basically say, and this page is basically the more people, the closer you are going to get to the accuracy, okay? Because you're going to get less variation. All right, that kind of makes sense. This is our bell curve, our sample, but they're talking about the margin of error going down because the samples go up so much. But the ones I like here, maybe the people you polled aren't reflective of the larger voting population. Yes, people from one area, which is a very rich area of New York called Staten Island, versus a rich kind of urban, which is Manhattan, or a rural area named Syracuse and or Queens or Bronx. They're all going to be looking a little different. If you poll a sample of 40% white, 20 black, 30 Hispanic, 10 Asian, but your actual turnout is 50% white, all these things are going to be wrong because you need to poll. The military says you have to train like you fight. Well, we need to do data mining and we need to get the data like we fight, like we're going to use the data. So these are systemic errors. These are errors that are going to increase and create a bias, and that's our problem. Okay, how do we develop systems that are going to be correct? We need to be able to look and see these biases and systemic problems that we have. All right. And this one's in here because prior to a lot of this, so this is the 1950s, President Truman was running for re-election, and everybody said Dewey was going to win. And in the U.S., they get the election results from the East Coast and the South first, and from the West Coast last because of 3-hour time difference across the U.S. And so they said, based on all that, they were predicting that Dewey would win, and they printed their newspapers at 11 o'clock at night. Well, the election results come in, and there is President Truman holding up the newspaper saying that the Chicago Daily Tribune newspaper was wrong. Okay, they just got it out wrong. Okay, so important things to kind of do. So forecasts, the flukes and whatnot. Does ice cream or swimming cause polio? This was the issue of going through and basically the causation versus correlation. Does swimming or ice cream cause polio? No. Okay, they don't cause a disease. Okay, but they go up at the same time because people are out interacting, and polio is a very contagious disease. But they said, nope, ice cream causes it, so there are no ice cream sales. And swimming, there's no swimming, okay? But that's not the right thing. So we need to understand correlation of how things are related versus causation of when something actually causes the other. I'll let you read through that, and let's see. So a number of critical things, because we're here at the end, starting with the wrong questions. Basically data mining is an expensive type of thing. We need to make sure there's going to be a lot of hours that you put in on data in business. Okay, so what are the questions that you're answering? Is the data the right data? Did you fix it? Did you clean it up? And they say that in some cases, 80% of the job, 80% of the cost is fixing data. When we use mapping data, we actually do pre-processing, we grab the data, we do post-processing to go fix it, type of thing. So there are lots of things that we have to do, and that's before we even touch it. Okay. Weak stakeholder buy-in. These projects are expensive. We have to have all the people buy in and willing to spend the money to make it happen. This is one of the projects that you need to be able to have executives buy in so that they will allow you to make it all the way to the end. Yes, these projects do get big and expensive, but generally I like to have people do little wins that they can do, because if you give your boss a little win, okay, a little victory, then you can proceed and they'll be more willing. If you're just giving them nothing, then there's nothing there. Lack of diverse expertise. We need lots of knowledge, the causation, the correlation, understanding all of these things that we're doing, understanding the business, understanding how the data, where the data comes from. There needs to be a lot of expertise across the board. Not, one person isn't going to be able to do it all. Okay. So mining different types of knowledge, interactive, incorporation of background knowledge, data mining queries, all these various things. Handling noisy or complete, looking at the patterns, and look at the patterns inside the errors. That's the biggest thing for me, because yes, the tools will do this, and how good is that tool? Well, what's the error? Okay, well, let's look at the error. Can we make the error any less by seeing if there's something in there? Parallel distributed incremental mining. Okay, we're going to be talking about AI a bunch. I'll let you read through those. And let me skip to the end. Role of AI, challenges, overcoming. All right. So we have some discussion questions. Again, the learning management system is not up. And once it gets up, I'll be putting those in. And we'll add time to make sure that you have time. But I'll be starting those in week 2. So I will assign the week 2. They're due in week 3. In week 5, they will turn off. Okay. So again, because you get the 2 weeks grace period. Okay. The team projects are the ones that you're going to be doing a pair of people. I generally only like to have 2 people in a team, because that way they work. If you have a third or fourth, typically 1 or 2 people do all the work. And so I know I want everyone to play. You guys will be presenting in weeks 14 and 15. Everything is due week 14. All the actual slides have to be turned in. They can't be updated. Everything has to be turned in, and you will be I'll be running the slides from the ones that you turn in. If you have to edit slides because of whatever reason, you will have a grade deduction. Okay. You have to, before week 10, you have to turn in a formal business proposal. Tell me what you're going to do. And I'm going to approve whatever you're going to do. I just want to make sure that you're looking for enough info and that you're going to be using enough tools and what you're looking for. Okay. Just to give you a little bit of guidance. That's all I care. Okay. So I'm not going to say, no, you have to do certain things. Okay. That is up to you. Okay. Let's see. This is Kaggle. This is the huge amount. Again, the links should be good. Of things that are out there, all these different wild things. And whenever we're doing any of these projects, I don't care where the data set comes from. Okay. I want you to find the weirdest, strangest thing that excites you. Okay. And whatnot. And so these are the things, because they are more interesting if you're excited with it. Okay. And then the last part is, again, this is the discussion. So starting next week, I'll ask, hey, does anybody have any questions? And if nobody has any question or nobody has any presentations next week, that's okay. But starting week 3, we need to get going, 3, 4, and 5. And if I'm not getting any week in 2, I may assign people to talk in week 4 or going on. But that normally it's up to you guys to present. Okay. You find the summary of the article. Okay. So this is the case study. The first half is really, what is it? What did the article say? The second one is, why do you care? What was the business impact? And the third part is just having the two sources, the 2 additional ones. If you just Google it. I mean, Google the title, Google the technique, whatever you want to do, get additional information so you're smarter, so you can give a very thorough presentation. 2 to 3 minutes on our pitch that we actually do in class. I ask 2 or 3 minutes worth of questions, and then that's it. You get full credit. We move on. Okay. And it must be in a business memo format. We'll talk about business memos. For those that were in the other class, same thing, the BLUF, the business memo format, but we will put that in next week's class. So do we have any questions? I don't see anything in chat, but if you do, let me go ahead, and we're a little bit late, so we'll get you guys off to lunch. Let me turn off the recording. And if you have questions, I am here. Other than that, please, hopefully enjoy the rest of your day. And for those that hopefully don't have any more class, go enjoy the weekend, because there's no assignments for this class. That's even better.